welcome to Trek Talk. I'm Matthew Kahn.
I'm Troy Harper.
We want to thank you for joining us for another exciting episode. Now, last time we were getting into a little bit of a movie debate and trying to give a short synopsis on each Star Trek film as we before we really got into it. And of course, there's 9 Star Trek movies, and there's so much information on each one. And we're both such diehard Star Trek fans. It's really
and we're both long-winded.
Extremely.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard for us to just kind of, stick to a short thing on each one because there's so many interesting details. But this show, we're going to finish the last 3 of the Star Trek films, which of course are Star Trek Generations, First Contact, and Insurrection, and then we'll kind of get into the movie debate. Now, the first 6 Star Trek films, of course, were all the classic
series cast.
The classic series
Kirk,
cast.
Spock, McCoy, and the rest.
Mm-hmm. And they just, they were what, of course, we started out with the motion picture, and as I kind of like, I don't really want to say that it was something that they played around with, because it really was an important thing for the first 6 movies to come off exceptionally well, to be made and produced to the highest level. But it really did give them a chance to kind of experiment with what works and what doesn't work in Trek on film. And I do believe that they did carry a lot of that over to the Next Generation films. We can kind of see that in Star Trek Generations. We can see the same big names that were there for the last 2 or 3 Star Trek movies. Star Trek 4, 5, and 6. We can see the same big names. Harve Burnett. I think Rick Berman worked a little bit on 6 as well. And those are 2 guys. Their names are big with Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager.
Yeah, these are the guys that kind of took it. Even when Roddenberry was alive, they took it to the points where Roddenberry, even admitted too that he had his limitations and what he could do with it. And he always gave it over to these guys, Harve Bennett and Rick Berman, for their creative style and their even in the original series, I forgot who he had there. In the classic series, he also had people that he brought in, experienced science fiction writers and the like, to develop storylines and whatnot that he couldn't do himself, and he knew that. He was great at creating these shows, but and he could take them a long way. But when he got to a certain point, he knew he had to give it to somebody else.
And it was a good thing for him to do that, because it gave the people that worked on those things the ability to, of course, after Roddenberry left us, gave those people the ability to take the show, all the series and the movies, and take that upon themselves and still keep going with it and doing, still superb, fantastic work. I mean, you could take a look at all these films, and granted, you do kind of have to be a Star Trek fan to a certain extent to enjoy some of these films, but not necessarily so. And I think that's one of the big things that we start seeing with the Generations, and it kind of actually goes back to Star Trek II. They started bringing in the new, they would bring in new faces, new actors to play certain roles. We start out with Kirstie Alley in Star Trek II, who is actually, who plays Lieutenant Saavik, who's supposed to take over Spock's role after he died. And of course later she got, Kirstie Alley of course dumped at Star Trek III because she wanted that permanent role. But since that was written out, she was replaced by, I believe it was Robin Curtis, or
Curtis, I believe.
She replaced Kirstie Alley.
One of the few instances where you ever see an actor be replaced.
Yes.
In Star Trek.
That's something you just don't do most of the time. You just don't replace somebody like that. But that's one of the few times that somebody actually was put into a character and somebody else had already played it previously. Yeah, they usually do not do that. But we see Kirstie Alley, and then Robin Curtis, and then of course we also have Christopher Lloyd playing an excellent Klingon commander in Star Trek III. And I have a feeling that Christopher Lloyd really kind of defined the Klingon
for the Next Generation.
For the Next Generation series, definitely. His style of brute. It was really weird to see a comedy actor like Christopher Lloyd take on a very serious bad guy role. And played it perfectly, and definitely Christopher Lloyd's performance in that was a step, kind of a helping hand to everybody else that came later to play Klingons in the original series and the following
Right,
movies.
and that too is kind of a throwback to the classic series, where you had the villains who were, in a sense, comical. You know, Harry Mudd, Trelane, some of the Klingon commanders. They were a bit comical, yeah, you know, villainous at the same time. And I think Christopher Lloyd really added on to that. That was an element they were looking for in the movies, you know, because they were trying to somehow attach the movies to the classic series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the, I think Christopher Lloyd really helped them accomplish that.
He really did. He very much did. In Star Trek IV, of course, we also have another very talented actress who played the biologist, the marine biologist.
Kim Cattrall, yeah.
Kim Cattrall played the marine biologist in that film.
Oh wait, in Star Trek 4? I'm sorry, that wasn't Kim Cattrall.
Oh no,
I'm
you're thinking of Star Trek 6.
My
Yeah,
apologies.
Star Trek 4. She plays the marine biologist. I never remember her name for the life of me.
I can't either.
But she is a very accomplished actress. She's been in multiple movies, several television series, television movies, and television series. Very accomplished actress. And then Star Trek 5, probably the biggest name you have in Star Trek 5 is David Warner, who of course apparently is a very big fan of Trek. He played numerous alien roles in The Next Generation. He also, of course, came back in Star Trek 6 and played Chancellor Gorkon in Star Trek 6. And then, of course, we also have the Klingon general, General Chang, who was played by Christopher Plummer. And that was just, that in itself just kind of let you know that they were really, that Star Trek really does have a large acting base outside of the regular crew members, because Christopher Plummer, I mean, everybody knows Christopher Plummer from The Sound of Music. That arguably, hands down, one of his best works ever. And Christopher Plummer, major theater in Toronto and England, Broadway, did several great movies, and then, you know, all of a sudden he's on Star Trek playing a Klingon. You know,
a very odd role for him. I remember when he was cast in that. I was a bit surprised by that. But since then, since Christopher Plummer's come along, that started a whole new theme of, you know, the big name classic film actor being a villain or playing a major role in your film. I mean, in Generations, you had
Malcolm McDowell.
Malcolm McDowell. I'm sorry, I forget his name. In an Insurrection, you had
F. Murray
Abraham, also, you know, playing a villain in that film. That's kind of a theme that's been recurring in Star Trek films as of late, to have the big name actor, and it's a very good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I like it.
And not to forget, probably one of the biggest ones was Alice Krige for the Borg.
Yeah, Alice Krige.
She's maybe not as big of a name as F. Murray Abraham or Malcolm McDowell until you get into the science fiction and horror genres themselves, where she is well known for movies like Habitat, and there's several other of those sci-fi
big
horror
name
films.
in cult films.
Definitely, and an excellent actress to boot. And she played her role very well. But that, like I said, that really starts to kick off in Generations, where you really start getting those bigger name actors that have done not only maybe stage stuff, but also starred in some major movies and played star roles themselves. You have Malcolm McDowell in Star Trek Generations, who plays an Elorian, who is desperately trying to get back to the energy ribbon in the Nexus, called the Nexus, so that he could basically live forever in ecstasy or whatever. That whole concept is still something. It wasn't. They didn't really go into too much technical detail about that, which is what they normally do with Star Trek stuff. But for some reason, the Nexus really wasn't given too much technical detail.
That's a bit of a recurring theme in Star Trek. You have the one fringe group who's always looking for some sort of heaven or Eden or something of that nature. And that's the most recent that has been brought back. It may have been done on Voyager and Deep Space Nine that I can recall. But it was done in the classic series. It's been done on The Next Generation before. It was done Star Trek V. It's a good example of that.
It's a good example of that. They did several episodes of that for DS9, and I do believe that there were 2 or 3 episodes on Voyager that dealt with something similar to that. But it is, I think it's it is a recurring theme, and I think it's probably one of the major ones, right up there with time travel.
Probably so.
Right up there with time travel. But Generations also had a little bit of that spattered in there, just a bit.
Just a bit, yeah.
How else would you get Captain Kirk and Captain Picard fighting side by side?
Precisely.
And of course, I think that was probably the biggest thing about that film, was the simple fact that you had Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, the two biggest captains, of course, at the time this film came out. Those were the two captains you had. So it was always this big thing. What would Captain Picard do if he ever met Captain Kirk? You know, would they get along? Would they agree? And they really kind of played that up during this film. Just, you know, what would there were two captains separated by an entire generation. How would they interact? You know, what would they do? And of course, we get that classic line from Kirk, you know, that he was saving the galaxy when his grandfather, well, Picard's grandfather, was still in diapers.
And I also like how Picard's lecturing Kirk on protocol, on duty.
Yeah.
As it were, you know, this is because that's kind of define their roles. Kirk was always the maverick, you know, going outside the lines, doing everything, you know, a lot of the times in the best interest for everyone, but also kind of doing things on his own terms, for himself a little bit. And Picard's actually the opposite. You know, right. Picard's always doing things strictly for the benefit of everyone else, strictly for the benefit of his crew, strictly for the benefit of his ship. Everything always in the name of duty and honor. And he's lecturing Kirk on how to be a Starfleet officer, which I thought that was kind of funny.
That was kind of interesting. And then of course the Kirk's death scene in that movie.
Controversial.
Very, actually, very, because you know, it's almost taboo in Star Trek to kill characters.
Especially major characters.
Especially major characters. That was one of the big arguments, like we said before, with Star Trek 3. A lot of people didn't go see that movie because you can't kill Spock, for crying out loud. What are you doing? But I think Shatner wanted a real sense of closure with Kirk's character. He didn't really want Kirk to come back, because by this time William Shatner has his Tech series out, Tech Lords, Tech World, and all those novels that he was working on, and a couple of made-for-TV movies, I believe, and he was working on as well. So I believe this was kind of Shatner's chance to kind of give his closure to the whole Star Trek side of things. And of course, we had Jimmy Doohan, who came back and did some Next Generation stuff.
Spock and Leonard Nimoy as well. And
Leonard Nimoy. DeForest Kelley, before he passed on,
away, yes.
Also did a couple of episodes. Still is the old Dr. McCoy, the Southern gentleman, 140 something?
Something of that nature.
130 something?
Very, very old.
Lord.
One of the things that bothered me about Generations was the fact that I would like to have seen Kirk and Picard interact a little longer. Not just for that one little short scene that they did. It would have been great to see how they would have interacted. It would have been great to see how Kirk would have interacted with the Next Generation crew, or Picard would have interacted with the original crew. It would have been great to see that kind of thing. And I understand that the whole reason for making Generations was to make people a little more comfortable with the transition, and they wanted to give the Next Generation crew a little more time. But I didn't think that was completely necessary. The Next Generation had its own huge following at the time.
Yeah, it sure did.
That's one of the reasons why they brought it to film, is because they knew it was going to be a big moneymaker. It was going to draw in huge audiences. And I thought it would have been a lot better if Kirk and Picard had spent a little more time interacting.
Definitely, and I agree with you there. Also, my biggest beef with the film was you have a 40 or 45-year-old Klingon bird of prey taking out the flagship of the Federation.
True.
Now, if it was a simple thing about field modulation, I think Geordi would have had enough insight to think, you know, I'm going to reach over here and push the field modulator resequencer, and everything would have been solved.
Everything would have been great.
Because as soon as those shields would have been the frequency on those shields remodulated, then they would have been impervious to fire.
If we're getting into technicalities as well, wouldn't it have been if they had transported Geordi back over into the Enterprise? Wouldn't they have known there's a transmitter in his visor?
Yeah.
I think they could have figured that out.
There would have been,
since we're getting technical, you know, I don't want to sound too nerdish here, but that To me, that bothered me. That bothered me a little bit. I thought they should have known that.
Right.
That should have, there's a signal coming out of our ship going to the Klingon ship, sir.
Yeah.
What do you do about it?
I think the whole thing about it was just the fact that I think they kind of got a little bit too comfortable with destroying starships with Star Trek 3. So you can't just destroy a starship anytime you want to, but for reasons unknown, they kind of wrote that in there. I guess that they could bring in the E. I guess they felt
I think so. Which the E's a nice ship. But it brings up the point to me that the Next Generation, as much as I love the Next Generation, it's my favorite series. It was always written and done as something that we're going to put into the movies.
Right.
They're going to put in the movie. It was formulaic in that sense.
It was.
They knew they were driving in that direction the whole time.
Right.
As soon as the show picked up steam, as soon as they knew it was a success, it was driven toward putting it on film.
Right, because it's a legacy. With Star Trek, it's not really a thing of money making. It's not really a thing of, yes, there are those elements that are tied in there.
Mm-hmm.
Great story writing, great actors, and making a little bit of money. But really, the whole theme of Star Trek is legacy, and that's definitely what they wanted to do with the Next Generation crew.
Right.
That's why First Contact really came as a shock, I think, to a lot of Star Trek viewers and Star Trek fans, because unlike any Star Trek film before, this was an action movie.
Oh, this was a big action movie.
This wasn't.
This was cutting loose, as we say. This is the most. This is just. I don't know how to explain it. It's just from start to finish. There's no stopping hardly at all.
Definitely. We've had our fair share of good action sequences, such as Star Trek II. Of course, we had the great the ship battles.
Right,
and the showdown confrontation stuff, the whole showdown in the nebula, which was, to me, just, awesome.
Yeah.
Very hard to beat. But then you come in with First Contact, and instead of the whole, of course, right there in the very beginning, you have the entire Starfleet
battle with the Borg cube.
Battle with this Borg cube. And, of course, we all know how that always goes. That Borg cube is dang near indestructible. And they're tearing up Starfleet ships like they're origami paper boats, just left and right. It was just interesting to see that the action shift away from ships blowing each other up and shifting into a mode of actually going to a mode of hand to hand interpersonal fighting. Picking up the phasers and just going at it.
Well, and to me also the show. After 7 years, the show was on the air, and then you had the Generations movie. The show, spent most of its time. They had great action on the show. It spent most of its time talking about, we're somewhat pacifist. We won't fight you unless we absolutely have to. Things, aren't going to go down that way. Swap that off the table and just went after it. We got sequences in there. Data, snapping the neck of a Borg.
Yeah.
You've got, people just, Picard, of course, going insane with vengeance, on his mind, going to, eventually destroy, opting to destroy the Enterprise E. It's just this great movie. It was, everyone's, not necessarily breaking character, but breaking out of that mold of we're just pacifists. And there's a great little scene where Alfred Woodard is lecturing Picard on being, too pretentious and too self-righteous.
Right.
And also, it's kind of I think they were making a joke in themselves about, we are a bit too pretentious. We do, we are a little politically correct on the show and pacifist and everything of that nature. Why don't we get, someone stab a stick at us for once and see how it feels.
Yeah.
And I think that was great.
It was, and it was probably one of the most memorable sequences in a Star Trek film.
I think so.
Was that one sequence right there. Of course, then they followed that up immediately with Insurrection. So we've got this huge following of people that jumped in on First Contact and saw all this action. That's what we were expecting with Insurrection.
I think so, yeah.
They kind of teased this in the trailer with shots of the entire crew picking up phaser rifles and, the town being shot up.
Well, in the title, Insurrection.
Insurrection.
That gives you some, it gives you some clue as to, there might be fighting involved here.
And definitely there will be. It just really kind of.
Again, Jonathan Frakes directed too. He directed First Contact.
Right.
His first feature film. He directed some episodes of The Next Generation prior to that, and I forgot who they were trying to get. I believe they were trying to get Michael, the Rock director, Michael, what's his name? They directed Armageddon and The Rock, and
I have no clue.
well, anyway, they were trying to get that guy. I knew Michael something or another. They were trying to get that guy to direct it, and he backed out at the last minute, so they couldn't find anyone else, so they gave it to Jonathan Frakes, who had directed some of the episodes of the TV show. And he said, great, I'll do it. And it's his first feature film, and they brought him on to Insurrection as well, and which also, I think, kind of gave people the impression that there was going to be a lot of action sequences.
A lot of action, but and they really kind of teased us even further. You went in and saw the movie, and in the first 2 or 3 minutes after the titles finally quit popping up on screen, there's a firefight on the hills and people running and screaming, and you know,
Data throwing around invisible people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just get the impression that okay, we're going back to the whole action thing. But I have to say that they really did try to incorporate some more of the action stuff in there to kind of keep the interest of action sequences in Star Trek up. But they also went back to the whole normal thing that they did with films and kind of make it story-oriented, just very deeply story-oriented at that. And they really focused on a little bit more of the character development than like Generations did. Generations did focus quite a bit on character development. And the action and the stuff going on and the story as a whole was actually quite short and very small. Now, First Contact's exactly the opposite. The story was focused on the action.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't watch the story and ignore the action and get anything out of it. But Insurrection kind of went back to that Generation style, where they had this nice story, but it was extremely short. So they beefed it up with a lot of character interaction and character development, which really wasn't all that bad. They introduced a new race, 2 new races to us, and the whole searching for Eden thing comes back into play once more. And for the first time, we actually see something on Trek that you really don't see, which really kind of surprised me. Whenever Riker has control of the ship and they're flying around through the briar patch, and they they open the ram scoops up to suck in all that deadly explosive nebula gas. They suck it all up, and of course Riker gets a manual control that pops out
like a video game controller.
Like a video game controller, you know. It looks like they took a Flight Stick Pro and stuck it to the top of a little pedestal.
Which is probably what they did.
Probably what they did, but it just pops out of the. It pops out of the middle of the floor, and you got Riker bent over this little joystick, you know, like he's playing a video game. And throughout Star Trek, you hardly ever see any type of manual control of that nature.
Never.
It's almost always either button or voice activated. And to actually have something that you could grab onto like that and
I think that's a good sense of showing you that Riker is very proficient with such things. He's supposed to have been a very good pilot, according to the story. Okay, well, now this year is supposed to be another year for a Trek movie.
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. The way the schedule's set up, it's supposed to be at Christmas. So the security's pretty tight on what they're doing. So what would you like to see?
Oh, what would we like to see? Personally, my own personal, I'm a big DS9 fan. I would really love to see another Federation Klingon fleet facing off the Cardassian Dominion threat over the Bajor system.
I think that war is over, though, but they might start something.
Well, we don't. I mean, we don't really know. I mean, that was one of the interesting things about ending the show where they did. We don't really know what's going on because the crew in Voyager has.
Well, personally, I would like to see a combination DS9, Next Generation crew working together, having a big, huge movie, make it like it's a huge casting movie, like It's a Mad World or something like that with Star Trek. Just throw everybody in there and have a big. And if they don't do that, if they work strictly with Next Generation crew, one of the formulas I'd like to see them bring back that work really well, and they only did it in one film, The Murder Mystery.
Yes.
Made a great film in Star Trek VI. I think they should bring that back and do it for another one.
Be an excellent film.
For future references if you're watching this, Paramount.
Well, we're about out of time, but we want to thank you for watching our show. As always, we have the ship's log. If you have any opinions or, give us what you think about these movies that we've gone over. You can always write to us at Ship's Log, Lamar University, Box 10050, Beaumont, Texas 77710. Or you can email us at trektalklu@hotmail.com. And we want to thank you for joining us. The next show that we have, we're going to actually get into the debate part of this.
Yeah, I think we're actually going to do a debate on this.
We're actually going to get into a debate about these films. And
we might have some people show up too. Who knows?
Possibly.
We might have some other opinions down here.
Definitely.
We'll see. And definitely write us in your opinion. If you get us something in what your favorite film is. And we'd like that.
We'd really like to hear from you. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us.